Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. So we've covered quite a bit of Spider-Verse related material, haven't we? We looked at the lead-in material for the Spider-Verse storyline, we looked at the Spider-Verse storyline itself, and we looked at all the tie-in material for said storyline, ranging from individual miniseries that were created specifically for the storyline to issues from ongoing series that tied into the plot of it. Basically, there is a lot of Spider-Verse related material that we've covered, and as I said on Sunday, we've kind of reached the end of anything connected to the original storyline. But I also mentioned that we're not done with what I call the Spider-Verse era. So what else is there to look at? Well, for starters, follow-up material. Yep, despite the fact that the Spider-Verse storyline was over and done with, and we did, like I said, we did finish looking at the tie-ins, there were follow-up series and storylines that were released afterwards that pretty much did tie into Spider-Verse and did operate on similar themes and storytelling, especially in regards to the characters, and as a result of that, I felt that they were still worth looking at for these retrospectives. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next, for the next vlogs that we're going to be taking a look at. We're going to be looking at all the related follow-up material to Spider-Verse, and to kick things off, we're going to be looking at a mini series that, well, is a tie-in, not a tie-in to Spider-Verse per se, but rather Spider-Verse tying into another event comic. Which event comic? Well, Secret Wars. And no, I'm not talking about the 1980s Maxi series. I am instead talking about the 2015 sequel/remake of the same name. Now, if you haven't read Secret Wars, allow me to explain the premise of it. So, remember when we were looking at Spider-Verse, and at a couple points they mentioned incursions, this event that was going on behind the scenes wherein entire universes were being destroyed, and one of the casualties of those things was Spider UK's own world of Earth 833? Yeah, those didn't stop. Basically, behind the scenes, the incursions were wiping out entire universes, causing worlds to collide with one another and completely annihilate them. And as worlds continue colliding and destroying each other, it wound up causing a domino effect that essentially cascaded throughout the entire multiverse, causing world after world to just be destroyed until eventually, in the entire multiverse, only two worlds remained. Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, and Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. And sadly, like all the other Earths, they were set to collide as well. Now, of course, the heroes of both Earths were made fully aware of this fact, especially since as part of the collision they both could literally look up and see the other Earth in the sky. But sadly, despite the efforts of the heroes of both worlds, they could not stop this, and sadly, the end result, both realities were destroyed, and the multiverse died. But not all hope was lost. For you see, outside of time and space, a trio of superpowered beings was at work attempting to fix what was going on. And these beings included Dr. Stephen Strange, Victor Von Doom, aka Dr. Doom, and another supervillain by the name of Owen Reese, aka the Molecule Man, which, if you don't know by his name, his shtick is that he can literally control molecules, which honestly makes him probably one of the most powerful villains ever, because, everything's made of molecules. But put simply, these trio of super powerful beings were able to find out who was technically responsible for the incursions, and were able to track them down. And basically, these beings were a race of there was a godlike race of beings called the Beyonders, who basically, I don't know basically all the details of how they started it, but basically from what I can tell, in one alternate universe, they killed off Owen Reese, and that's what caused the cascade. And put simply, the main universe, Owen Reese didn't like that, and so that's what led to him and Doctor Doom trying to seek them out, so Doctor Strange came along the way. But put simply, the three of them are now at the edge of existence and are confronting the Beyonders, and pretty much just call them out. And sure enough, the Beyonders came to confront them, and, well, despite their godlike powers, this trio of two heroes and one hero and a villain ultimately defeated them. And how they did that was through Owen Reese's powers to manipulate molecules. He was essentially able to siphon out the Beyonders' powers through him and try to channel them into another being. Now, originally, Doctor Strange was going to try and take the power in himself, but sadly, he didn't have the metal to do it, and so Doctor Doom took on the powers, and as a result, he wound up absorbing the powers of all of the Beyonders, which in turn pretty much gave him the power of a god. And using these powers, and with the guidance of both of Molecule Man and Stephen Strange, he was able to gather bits and pieces of the destroyed worlds from across the multiverse and piece them back together into a brand new world, made up of all these individual fragments that came to be known as Battle World, with Doctor Doom acting as its god and master, and Doctor Strange acting as, well, the closest thing to a second in command. Now, Battleworld as a place, well, it existed for 8 years, and because of how Doctor Doom pieced it all together, the denizens of Battleworld had no knowledge that there was anything else before it. So from their perspective, Battleworld was all they knew. This is where they lived their lives, this is where they grew up, this is where all their big events happened. Pretty much to the people of Battleworld, this was all they knew. And since since Battleworld was made up of bits and pieces from all the destroyed universes, every region of Battleworld was essentially a remnant of a dead universe, complete with each region having its own versions of individual characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Hank Pym, and so on and so forth. And as a result of that, essentially all the locations on Battleworld were essentially, as the name implies, they were essentially the remains of the multiverse, all now living new lives. And while each of them did have to get some structuring and reordering in order for them to fit into Battleworld's history, for the most part, because each region was supposed to be a domain unto itself, the individual histories of each domain were left unaltered. So, to the eyes of the people living there, nothing changed. Of course, a few minor details had to be altered here and there, but for the most part, Battleworld was essentially a safe haven for what was left of the multiverse. Although, with Doctor Doom acting as its Lord and Master, and considering that the guy is an arrogant dickwad, you kind of don't want him having all that power. And ultimately, he did lose it. By the end of Secret Wars, the survivors of the Marvel and Ultimate universes did end up banding their forces together and did manage to take Doctor Doom down and restore the multiverse to what it was. But for a time, Battleworld was all there was in the multiverse. Everything that was, is, or would be was supposed to be Battleworld, and well, Battleworld was around for a while. In universe, it existed for 8 years, and in those 8 years, stories were told, which is where the tie-ins come in. While a handful of the tie-ins for Secret Wars were somewhat involved with the plot of the miniseries, the majority of the tie-ins instead focused on Battleworld and how it worked. Now, some tie-ins focused on just like different parts of Battleworld, since, after all, this is the world made up of the fragments of the multiverse, so of course there's going to be some intermingling in some places, and for some of those tie-ins we did see them intermingle, like with the Thor's miniseries, which focused on Battleworld's police force, which was literally made up of all the Thors from across the multiverse that they gathered, or Ghost Racers, wherein all the Ghost Riders of the multiverse had been captured and forced to compete in death races for the admiration of the public. And of course, no one actually died. They're Ghost Riders, but basically losing was a bad idea. You didn't want to lose. If you were the winner, you got everything. If you lost, you got tortured. But put simply, it was basically just showcasing how Battleworld worked, but the rest of the tie-ins also focused on the individual regions themselves. And like I said, since each of these regions were remnants of dead universes, it allowed us, the audience, to peek back into some universes that had been pre-established as part of the Marvel Multiverse, with examples including Marvel Zombies, 1602, House of M, or 2099. But, and this is kind of a fun thing for me, some of the universes that we saw in Battleworld were completely new and original creations specifically made for Secret Wars, with 2 examples being Marvel 1872, which was supposed to be an alternate Marvel universe that was set in the Old West, and another one, which I'd have mentioned previously in these vlogs, The Amazing Spider-Man, Renew Your Vows, which, as I mentioned prior, was a universe where Peter Parker was still married to Mary Jane and they had a daughter, among other changes, but that's the most prominent one that we're going to be bringing up today. However, another cool aspect of the tie-ins is that they also were tie-ins from some of Marvel's biggest storylines, and since, of course, Battle World was made up of the fragments of the multiverse, we got to see alternate versions of those famous events and storylines. Case in point, one of the tie-ins was a tie-in to the famous Iron Man storyline, Armor Wars. Only in this reality, rather than Iron Man's technology being stolen by various supervillains, and thus he had to stop the spread of it and make sure that it didn't fall into the wrong hands, it instead focused on an alternate version of New York where everyone had been infected with a disease that caused their circulatory system to completely shut down, and as a result, to keep everybody going, they all had to wear suits of armor, which is why it was called Armor Wars. And another tie-in was actually tied into the event comic Civil War, and showcased us a universe where the Civil War not only never ended, but actually escalated to the point where America was split down the middle, with Captain America leading one side and Iron Man leading the other. I actually own that miniseries. I think it's really damn cool and still falls into what I love about alternate universes, but we're not here to talk about those storylines. No. These are the Spider-Verse retrospectives, and of course, one of those storylines that tied into Secret Wars was Spider-Verse, and those tie-ins are collected in this trade, Spider-Verse War Zones, which contain a 5-issue miniseries of a storyline involving a handful of the Spideys from the destroyed multiverse. Now, of course, like I said, because of how Battle World was structured, the various Spideys in the multiverse do not remember what happened in Spider-Verse, and thus for them, when they meet each other in the storyline, it's a completely new thing. And sadly, they don't include every Spider-Man in existence like they did in the main storyline, but they do try to get a few that you would most likely know, especially from the original storyline. But is it any good? Is this miniseries worthy of bearing the Spider-Verse name, or is it ultimately an embarrassment in the end? Well, that's what we're here to find out, as today we're going to be starting a discussion on the Spider-Verse tie-ins to Secret Wars as we take a look at Spider-Verse Volume 2, Number 1. And the first issue begins on a rainy night in New York City, or more specifically, a New York City in one of the regions of Battle World, because, again, fragments of alternate universes, there's going to be there's quite a few alternate versions of New York in there. But basically, this one seems very much like any other New York. It has it's set in the modern day. It has regular people walking around. It has monuments. It's got dockyards. It's just pretty mundane, average stuff. And just like in New York, it has some crazy people running around. Specifically, in the beginning of this story, we end up seeing the supervillain known as the Jackal, as he and two of his henchmen are at a graveyard and, well, attempting to rob a grave. And of course, thankfully though, they are stopped in their tracks as they end up encountering one of the characters in the storyline, specifically Spider-Gwen, who comes in and just starts whooping their asses something fierce until she eventually manages to knock them all down and webs them to a tree, so if the cops can arrive and get them. But the thing is, she didn't arrive to the cemetery because they were causing a ruckus. Of course, she wasn't going to let them do that, but the thing is, Gwen was already at the cemetery, mostly because, as she puts it, it's her quiet place. Why? Well, she's been feeling a bit weird lately. As I've mentioned, because of how Battleworld was structured, the denizens of it have no memory of their original lives in the multiverse. So wherever someone lives on Battleworld, from their perspective, they've been that way the whole time. No matter how strange and drastic everything looks, they just kind of accept that this place is fact, that this is where they've always been, this is how they've always lived. But Gwen feels different. For whatever reason, she has remnants of her original life before Battleworld existed. She has faint memories of when she was in the Mary Janes, and those memories kind of manifest as it's later said in the story, presque-vu, tip of the tongue. Basically, she remembers these events, but only very faintly, and anytime she tries to focus in on them, they kind of fade away, like waking up from a dream. And as a result, it's made Gwen feel out of place in her domain. Very much strange. Made even stranger by the fact that, well, she's essentially a non-person here. As while Gwen can swear that she has lived in this New York all her life, well, there's a reason why the cemetery is her quiet place. Because in the cemetery are gravestones dedicated to her and her father. So yeah, obviously Gwen has a few questions regarding that. However, we won't be seeing those questions answered just yet, because after Gwen decides to leave the graveyard, the comic ends up cutting over to a dockyard as we see a group of supervillains, specifically the Enforcers, who are like these street-level thugs with special talents each, who are usually who Spidey has faced as early as his early days. And they're pretty much in the middle of a smuggling operation in the docks. Now, on the sidelines of the docks, we see an Indian boy just kind of watching them, holding on a tablet, just kind of and scanning something. We don't know what, but he's just kind of keeping an eye on the smugglers. However, as he does this, everybody gets interrupted as someone swings onto the scene and pretty much decides to start wrecking everybody's shit. And that person is Billy Braddock, aka Spider UK, who upon arriving proclaims that of course he doesn't blame them for not being cautious because his exploits haven't reached out in the news, but he is Spider-Man and he is here to stop their smuggling operation. Of course, one of the enforcers, in this case, I think it's Montana. Yes, he's the Texan of the group. He claims that, well, there's no way that Billy is Spider-Man. For one thing, Spider-Man was not British. So and two, well, we end up, as we learn, this domain Spider-Man has not been around for years. Apparently, at one point, he just kind of vanished without a trace, and no one has seen him since. So, it's very clear that this guy ain't Spider-Man. When they further prove that fact, they end up pulling a sniper rifle on him. Yeah, there was a sniper off to the side that was keeping track of anyone tried to come in and start messing with their business, and, well, they managed to get a good laser sight on Billy, and Montana is able to use that as grounds for saying that he's not really Spider-Man because Spider-Man has a spider sense and Billy doesn't have one. And Billy even admits, "Yeah, you're right, I don't have a spider sense, but don't worry, I got someone to cover for that." And sure enough, the snipers end up getting knocked aside as we see that there is in fact a third spider person in this domain, Anya Corazon, aka the main universe Spider-Girl. Yep, despite having the multiverse be destroyed, she is still partnered with Billy on Battle World. And from their perspective, it's basically just master and apprentice. As Billy mentions in a later issue, they just happen to meet up and he decided to take her under his wing. So, yeah, but either way, yeah, they're kicking ass together and just being back-to-back crime fighters, with Billy offering her tutelage in any way possible. As such, with the two Spideys working together, they're able to take out the Enforcers and all the criminals in the area, and their plan is just to leave them tied up for the cops like Gwen did at the cemetery. And as such, the Indian boy decides that he might just go down and say hello, when suddenly he gets a tingling in the back of his head, and he realizes danger is afoot. And sure enough, danger is afoot, as coming from out of the docks come these two flying machines. I want to say gliders, but don't quote me on that. Or hover, but I don't know what they are. What are they? Hold on one second. I'm just going to say hover devices. I really don't know what the word is. But basically, these two hover devices fly in from the bay, and from the cargo that the Enforcers were supposedly smuggling, come a bunch of armored guards with laser rifles. Yep, this was all a trap, and it was all set up to capture Billy and Anya. As such, the Indian boy quickly realizes that he needs to step in and do something, and it's here we learn who this boy is. As it turns out, he is a fourth Spidey in this domain. Specifically, Pavitr Prabhakar, aka Spider-Man India. Which, yes, I can now finally say his name properly thanks to the trailers for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Thank you for that, by the way, Marvel. But either way, yeah, Pavitr immediately suits up and just swings into the fray and helps Billy and Anya, taking out one of the gunners in the air, and after throwing him into the bay, he ends up taking control of his ship and shoots at the other one. As such, with the three Spideys working together, they're able to take out all the hired goons and allow them to escape. And so, once the three Spideys are clear of the operation, they finally have a chance to talk. Now, again, I have to remind you, none of them remember their previous meeting in the original Spider-Verse. So, from their perspective, they have no idea who the other is. So, they just start introducing each other, basically revealing their names, their identities, and how it turns out, Pavitr was actually kind of seeking them out. Much like with Gwen, he's been feeling out of place in this domain. That despite the fact that he's lived here his whole life from his perspective, he doesn't feel like this is where he belongs. And he's been having faint memories of living another life that, while he swears could be very real, the instant he tries focusing on it, just sort of vanishes. And to kind of add to that sense of deja vu, well, it turns out that the Spideys, that Billy and Anya, despite the fact that they cannot consciously remember their previous adventure with Pavitr, they do have a feeling that they've met him before, and Pavitr has a similar thing with him. with them, which is part of why he sought them out, because well, he feels that they're connected, and of course Anya and Billy ask how he was able to do that, and well, it turns out he's been kind of fine-tuning his spider sense. For whatever reason, for whatever reason, with all these feelings of feeling out of place and not belonging, he was able to utilize he was able to utilize his scientific expertise to tap into whatever his spider was connected to, and well, map it out, which is what we saw him doing just when he was waiting to go and intervene in the smuggling operation, as we saw him holding a tablet that seemed to be mapping out a web, and well, the web is what he, Billy, and Anya are connected to, which is why he was able to find them. However, with this in mind, they also begin to wonder exactly what else is. Hold on one second. Sorry, I had to check on something. But yeah, with this revelation, the comic ends up cutting back to Gwen Stacy, and we see how her life's been going in this domain. And pretty much since, well, legally her counterpart here is dead, she doesn't really have a lot going for her here. She's been living in apartments. Nobody really asked for her name, and to try and pass the time, she's been looking into her death, so to speak. And pretty much, just like in the main Marvel universe, her death in this domain was very similar to her death in the main universe. Green Goblin chucked off a bridge, Spider-Man was involved, and Spider-Man was involved. However, of import is that just like Montana said at the docks, Spider-Man apparently vanished some years after her death in this domain. So, well, Gwen thinks that if she wants answers to what the heck's going on, she can't rely on Spider-Man because wherever he is, he might not be hard to find. But there is one lead that she can follow, as there were rumors of one other person being involved with her death, though nothing could ever be proven. And that person, of course, is Norman Osborn, who in this domain is the mayor of New York / Baron of this region, which, yeah, I should probably mention that each of the domains in Battleworld has someone ruling over that they call a Baron, and since Norman Osborn is the mayor of this region's New York, that makes him the Baron of this domain as well. So, good on him, I guess. However, it's clear that there's something up with him, and before you say, well, it's Norman Osborn, of course there's something up with him. Well, the thing is, it's clear that he's trying to hide something, as the comic cuts to a press conference that he's holding the next day, and during said press conference, he talks to the media about the events involving Billy and Anya and the beat up with the cemetery with Spider-Gwen. However, any details related to the mention of any spider people are omitted from his story, as he mentions that the operation of the docks was just a sting operation that was the culmination of months of planning, and the stuff with Spider-Gwen and the capturing of the Jackal and his henchmen was just essentially an example of the right place at the right time for the police, which even Gwen finds strangely suspect, because yeah, while her exploits haven't been mentioned in the news, it's weird that they just did a full-on cover-up like that. However, Gwen doesn't really have a chance to really look into this, as after the media disperse and Norman goes back to his business, Gwen ends up going into Oscorp, and we see just how she's been investigating the place. She got a job there. She's using an alias, of course, calling herself Miss Woodley, but basically her train of thought is that if she can infiltrate Oscorp, if she can infiltrate Oscorp, I don't know why I called it Osborg. If she can infiltrate Oscorp, she can check into their service and gather information on her death and see where it leads her. Unfortunately for her, her pay grade isn't that high. After all, her pay grade isn't that high. However, there is a silver lining, as she's been traveling around Oscorp, she's been noticing an entire wing of the building that's off limits, and called special projects, and for whatever reason, she notices that only 3 people ever seem to come and go from that place. As such, Gwen decides that if she's going to gather any information, it's going to be in there, but she has to get in first, and sadly, getting in is a lot easier said than done, as the doorway to the special project is almost vacuum sealed shut, and the only way to get in is through a key card, which only those 3 employees that she's been scoping out have. As Gwen narrates, she's apparently been spending 2 months just scoping the place out, and today is the day that she's finally ready to make her move, as there's one employee that she thinks is possibly the dumbest, as she claims that he eats Pop-Tarts for lunch, because that equates to idiot, I guess. After she kind of ducks and cover and gets into her Spidey jammies, she ends up crawling over to the door, making sure to avoid the cameras, and waits for the guy to come out from the lab. And sure enough, when she comes out, she does try to go in and steal his key card, But it turns out he's smarter than Gwen gave him credit for, because the instant she grabs it, he realizes she's there, and so she has to web him up to keep him from talking. Thankfully, though, this was kind of a miracle in disguise, as not only did she need access to his keycard, but in order to get access to the information that was located in special facilities, she kind of needed his thumbprint. So, win-win all around. However, upon accessing the information in special projects, Gwen notices that Oscorp's been keeping an eye not just on her, but the other spider people in this domain, which kind of makes Gwen wonder what the hell Oscorp is planning. Made even stranger by the fact that as she in special projects, there is a regular mundane door on there that just has the name Peter on it. And so when Gwen asks the technician that she webbed up what's in there, well, he responds with a muffled because his mouth's shut. And so Gwen decides to check it out for herself. And upon entering said room, we find that this domain in fact has a fifth spider person. Specifically, Peter Porker, aka the Spider Ham. And how he gets introduced in this story is that he is unconscious on a bed with his Spidey suit hanging up on a rack next to it, and a bunch of machines and tubes all connected to him. Of course, Gwen is kind of horrified to see this, and she starts rustling the good Mr. Porker awake because she thinks that he's in danger and she wants to help him. However, just as Peter ends up waking up, Gwen end up getting an unexpected visitor, and thus the story ends as in the doorway to Peter's room, they see Norman Osborn leaning back and telling Gwen that he's been expecting her. But that's not where the comic ends. That's where the story ends, but there's actually a backup story in the comic, and this one is called Pig in the City. It's called Pig in the City, and this one actually focuses on Spider-Ham and showcases what he's been doing while living in this domain. And put simply, it's not that good. But here's the thing: despite the fact that he's his world's equivalent of Spider-Man, he's still an anthropomorphic talking pig. And when it comes to Battle World, especially this region, the majority of the populace are human. So yeah, life isn't exactly easy for an anthropomorphic cartoon pig in a world full of humans. However, he does try to make the best of it, though because of his status, he does typically live in like shanty towns and tent cities and whatever. And while they're welcoming to him at first, well, he does end up getting booted from each one, especially since, well, he's a talking pig. He's a talking pig, and people can blame him and use him as a scapegoat for anything. However, Spider-Ham does eventually get a break at one point, as one day while he's hunting for truffles, an old lady sees him digging in her yard, and she thinks that he's her grandson. And since she's mostly blind, well, Spider-Ham just rolled with it and says, yeah, Granny, I'm your grandson. I just came here to bury something that I dug up, to dig something that I buried. And so she ends up letting him live with her, and from this old lady's house, Peter just has a modestly good life. He ends up taking advantage of his photojournalism skills, and ends up becoming a food blogger, and because most food delivers to his place nowadays, he can just order it in, and no one has to give him weird looks when he gets his food. So, good life all around, right? Well, it is until the old lady's grandson actually comes home, as he wants to try and mooch off his grandma to get a piece of his car fixed. And of course, the instant he sees Spider-Ham there, he begins freaking the hell out. Eventually, though, he does kind of calm down as he and Spider-Ham get to talking, and they actually do become buddies. But the guy does kind of eventually get Spider-Ham out of the house, as he mentions that there's a circus somewhere down the road, and well, this kid was apparently friends with the sword swallower of the circus, so he convinces Ham, hey, if I sell you there, we might get able to get some good money. And so Ham kind of rolls with it and allows himself to be sold to the circus, wherein he's actually a big hit. Everyone loves him, and he makes an act out of essentially being a kind of an insult comic, or just a comic in general. But simply, he has a good sense of humor and everybody loves him. And despite the fact that on stage he's in a cage, he does have his own trailer. Again, life is good for him. Everything is great. But even through all this, the good Spider-Ham begins to wonder, when's his next big break gonna come up? And, well, we kind of get the answer to that as the final panel of the comic showcases Norman Osborn watching from the audience with a sinister smile on his face. So, yeah, that's that. So that's that. Alright, so my thoughts on the first issue of the Spider-Verse tie-ins. Quite frankly, I like it. What I do like one of the things that I love about the Secret Wars tie-ins is that you don't necessarily have to read Secret Wars in order to understand them. You just need some base familiarity with the source material. For some storylines. For other storylines, you thankfully can go in blind, like with Armor Wars, which the only thing I really knew about that was that it was a universe where everybody wore a suit of armor, which I thought was cool, especially since we did see more versions of superheroes in that place. But the same thing can be applied to Spider-Verse here. All you really need to know is that it's a tie-in to Spider-Verse, and the thing is, with the tie-ins to Secret Wars, at the beginning of every book, at the beginning of every one, they always give like a summarized version of what happened and what led to the creation of Battleworld. How the multiverse was destroyed, how the heroes of the Marvel Universe and the Ultimate Universe did their best to stop it and failed, and now all that's left is Battleworld that's being maintained by the Iron Fist of Victor Von Doom, and so on and so forth. It gets you it catches you up to what the heck's going on, and even if you don't fully understand how this is possible, because quite frankly, I did not know how Doctor Doom had become a god until I actually read Secret Wars. But with that said, with that being said, all you really need to know is that the multiverse is gone, and that what we're seeing here are what's left of it. The people of the multiverse living a life in a new world, not even fully aware that anything is gone. To them, life goes on. They're living in this place, and despite them all as being under Doctor Doom's fist, well, life is life. They all still have their daily goings on. They all still go to work. They all still have families. They all still have hobbies. Pretty much from their perspective, everything's fine. And it's a similar case here with the Spider-Verse tie-ins, because from the outset, we know what we're getting into. Like with the main storyline, we're going to be seeing a bunch of Spideys coming together and teaming up. But what I like here is how they lay the groundwork for it. How the Spideys are drawn together is that they all realize that something isn't right. Because from all of their perspectives, they don't feel like they belong, which in a way makes sense, because all of them are very radically different spider people. All of them really do not belong in this region of Battleworld. We got Spider UK, who's a British Spider-Man, so it feels strange that someone who's so intensely markets himself as a British Spider-Man to the point where he has a Union Jack on his chest would start working out of New York. You got Anya Corazon, who it seems strange that she'd be partnering up with this random guy who's in Spidey jammies. You got Spider-Man India, who feels like he's a long way from home. And then especially you have Spider-Gwen, who it's even stranger for her because her counterpart is dead here. So it kind of feels weird that she's even here at all. Why is she? And from all their perspectives, this is where they've come. This is what they've called home. This is what they've been used to for years, and yet something just does not feel right. Something is nagging at all of them. They have memories of lives that they swear they've never lived, but feel so real to them. And yet when they try to access those memories, it feels like it all fades away, like waking up from a dream, which I know I used that analogy before, but it's a good analogy, so I'm going to keep using it. But what I like too is that they're using this connection to investigate their surroundings, try and figure out exactly what's going on. In the case of Gwen, we see her taking steps like that when she begins investigating what happened to her counterpart and how it ties into what happened to Spider-Man. And thus we see her going into Oscorp and thus further going in and figuring out what's going on under the radar. And likewise, we see that again with the other Spideys, as we see Pavitr actually asking questions about what's happening and making more connections to it. It wasn't really emphasized in either the Spider-Man India miniseries or in Spider-Verse, but Pavitr is actually a very intelligent and smart kid. He is a scientist, like his main universe, like Peter in the main universe, and thus he uses that intelligence to kind of tap into his abilities, his spider sense, and it allows him to map it out, which in turn allows him to start making connections to other people and thus reaching out to them and finding kindred spirits. And I like that. I do like that. But I think what maybe makes it even cooler, in my opinion, is how they lay the foundation for what the plot going forward. Because in the beginning, they set up a mystery, something that can draw you in. And I especially like that with Spider-Verse because it ties back into Secret Wars somewhat. Basically, what's going on is that the Spideys all just feel just like I said, they feel out of place, like they don't belong here. And because they don't belong here, they begin seeking out answers to their situation and wondering what the heck's going on. They of course do have clear memories of some things, like in a later issue, they all remember how they each got their spider powers, but none of them really seem to know why things are muddled for them, why they can't seem to track, why they can't seem to belong, why they don't feel like they belong here, and so forth. And thus, that when they try and seek those answers, that it causes them to essentially want to peek behind the curtain, which in turn makes them aware of something bigger going on, which I dig. I like that, and I like the mystery, and I like how it kind of ties into the mystery with Norman Osborn, because, well, this region does have its own history to it, and it all seems to have to do with Spider-Man, because, well, we're told about this domain Spider-Man, that he did exist, and that he did have as much of a presence here as the main universe Spider-Man had in his city. Hold on one second. Sorry about that dog stuff. But yeah, like I said, basically, Spider-Man did have a presence in this city like the main universe Spider-Man did in his, but something happened to him. We are never told what, but we are told that he disappeared years ago. We are never given specific details, but it's clear that something sketchy is going on behind the scenes, especially since when any mention of any of these spider people is brought up at all, it's brushed under the rug. It's hidden. It's covered up. It's strange, and it makes you wonder how it all kind of fits together, especially in relation to Norman Osborn, because he clearly does have a stake in what's going on, especially when it's Gwen's looking into her death. She finds rumors of Norman Osborn being somehow connected, but never outright proven, and likewise, he's the one that's covering up the stories with the Spideys. And of course, what makes it even stranger, he's got Spider-Ham in one of his back rooms all hooked up to a machine. So, yeah, that's going to make you wonder exactly what the guy's up to, especially with the final shot in the first story being him telling Gwen that he was expecting her. So, yeah, I think for our first issue for the miniseries, I think it does a good job at laying down the pieces for the story and just kind of drawing you in with enough strings of a mystery to make you want to see where it goes, as we do see the Spideys essentially pulling at the thread of the tapestry and wanting to unravel it in order to find the truth. I like seeing that. I like how it's that commonality that brings them together this time. The common thread this time is not something that threatens all their lives. It's just something they all have in common that they all want to take care of, and thus, because of that connection, it brings them together, and ultimately it's what starts making them form a team. I like that. I think it's cool. It brings them to different. I like that. I think it's cool. It brings them to different places in the region, but ultimately it's the same outcome for all of them. So, I dig it. It's nice, and it does lay enough mysteries to keep you engaged. So, I dig it. If I have to list any real complaints of the story, it's only kind of one aspect, which I think I'll wait till I finish the story to actually talk about. But put simply, to kind of give a Cliff Notes version, I'm not a big fan of the artwork. I'll explain more why later, but I admit the artwork for this comic is a bit distracting for me. So that's kind of the only real flaw I would have in the story. But again, I'll get into more specifics later, as it's kind of a series thing more than an individual issue thing. So there you go. Otherwise, though, I still think it's a good story and does lay down the foundation, make you intrigued and want to see where everything goes and how it all ties together. So overall, good story, good first issue. And as for Pig in the City, I think it's just a fun little jaunt. It's cool I like that we get to see I love the kind of underlying goofy nature to the whole story, which makes sense considering the titular character is Spider-Ham. This is it, like I said, after all, Spider-Ham is kind of sort of a gag character, and yet he is kind of one of those characters that always seems to get featured the most prominently when it comes to Spider-Verse, and for good reason. He's kind of the epitome of a parody of Spider-Man. He's goofy, he's zany, he's over the top. He doesn't take things that seriously, and yet he's still a Spider-Man. He still kicks ass. He can still do a lot of awesome stuff. And what makes it kind of fun, too, is that we just kind of see him adapting to living on Battleworld. He was, just like with the other Spideys, he does have memories of his life before Battleworld, as he does dream about swinging through his version of New York, kicking ass as Spider-Ham, and even his time when he was a spider before he got turned into this, in his web over his aunt's radioactive hairdryer, which is also actually kind of sort of technically what led to him getting his powers, but that's again going back to the whole bitten by a radioactive pig thing, which I'm not going to get into. But again, what I like too is that he just kind of rolls with everything. He just kind of, he's grateful for the breaks he gets, but he doesn't actively seek any of them out. He just kind of finds them or just goes to them because, he doesn't have anything better to do. He ends up living with the old lady because, well, he happened to be digging in her yard, and she mistook him for her grandson, and he just never corrected her. So, you know, hey, good. So hey, room and board, and he gets something viable out of it by doing his food vlog. And likewise, when he gets his second big break when he's sold to the circus, he doesn't really resist it in any way, and it's not something that's forced on him. He just kind of does it because, well, this old lady's grandson said, hey, maybe we could sell you to the circus. And he just went, okay, sure. And likewise, I like how he just kind of does his own thing in this scenario. He doesn't really seem to be minding where he is right now. He doesn't really care that he's a bum living on the streets, or that he's an anthropomorphic talking pig in a world full of anthropomorphic hairless apes. He's, of course, from his perspective, it's just like, oh, okay. Which I think kind of makes sense. He's not only his world Spider-Man, but he's an anthropomorphic cartoon pig. From his perspective, these things are probably not the strangest thing he's ever seen. But I do like how the story goes, and it's just ultimately a fun little jaunt. It just kind of showcases his backstory and how he wound up as he wound up at Oscorp's facilities, and how Norman Osborn found him. Again, nothing too big, just some silly little jaunts of Spider-Ham just kind of doing his own thing, and overall, it's fun. It's cute fun. So yeah, that's about it. So yeah, overall, main story I think is good. Lays enough pieces out to draw you in, make you wonder what's going on, while also kind of while also laying down enough to bring all the characters together and start forming a team. I like that. It's got some nice character stuff. Has enough of a mystery to draw you in and want to see what happens. And overall, just kind of a nice little beginning. And likewise, Pig in the City, fun little jaunt for Spider-Ham. Nice to see him just kind of doing his own thing before he gets pulled in. Overall. First issue, I think, is a good start to the miniseries. So, yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Thursday as we look at issue 2 of the Spider-Verse tie-ins of Secret Wars. So, till then, hope you have a good night. Hopefully you are a lot cooler than I am, and I'll see you next time. Take care.